Hello, I'm Rob McKnight. With over 30 years' experience in the television and radio business as a producer and presenter, this is Media McKnight. Now, a new season of Married at First Sight has started, and it's fair to say this one is going gangbusters for Nine. Ratings have been through the roof, and it's always around this time the production techniques used behind the scenes come under the spotlight. Last week on McKnight Tonight, I spoke with a former post-producer of the show, Alex Fennell. She's been openly speaking on TikTok about her experiences on MAFS, so I thought it would be worth having a chat with her. Despite the fact she posted a video calling the interviewer grilling, it really wasn't, I thought it was really insightful. We started by talking about the villain edit.
The villain edit, I will stand by this forever, is led by the person's characteristics. There is just no world that exists where we would create this villain out of this pure, nice, lovely person. It's led by their behavior, their reactions, and the way they treat their partner or the people they're in the experiment with.
No, I understand that, but people have been protected in the edit, past participants, yes, haven't they?
I think more than any, but that's not the villain edit. So
No, I understand that. No, but what I'm saying is that there have been participants who have done pretty shocking things during the shoot, but they've been protected in the edit.
Oh, I've worked on 2 seasons, and in my season, it was not that somebody did extreme shocking things that they were protected by or protected from. It was more that the villain edit was a more accurate reflection of the way they really were, and then comparatively the other people just sort of paled in comparison, and so maybe some of their scenes were pulled back a bit.
We then spoke about tactics used on set, and look, it's important to note and remember that Alex was never on set. She worked in post-production, but I did wonder if she had ever seen anything sus in the raw tapes. There is a lot of concern, though, about how things are shot on set. I know you weren't there, but you've had access to the raw tapes. Some claims that have been made are pretty serious about people being held in their rooms. They feel like they've been kidnapped. Has there ever been anything you've seen in the raw tapes that didn't necessarily get to air that you thought, wow, that's crossing a line?
No, and I think I've never seen it, not saying it didn't happen, but I think this is the fundamental issue. People who haven't worked in television do not understand the concept of a call time. They don't understand the concept of an AD. They don't understand the concept of any of that. People who have worked...
No, but there's a difference when you've been held in a shoot for 18 hours, you've been plastered with alcohol, and you're there until the early hours of the morning told you can't leave, because if you break your contract, we will sue you.
That does sound quite awful, and I feel like if that behaviour exists, which if the cast say it exists, then I would probably err on the side of believing them, because I do believe so. I've heard it enough times to think that, yes, perhaps that is true. That is not good, obviously. And, yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I don't work for Married at First Sight anymore, and it just sounds like a terrible experience. But also, Rob, how long have you worked in showbiz? Have you ever had, 15-hour call days and been treated like crap by the EP? I have.
Well, that's true.
And
people who work in television are sort of like gluttons for punishment,
yes.
and these people don't know what they're getting into.
That's an element of it. That's an element of it. And I think, if you've worked in TV a little bit, it's normalized. So just like any kind of bad behavior is insidious, and it kind of just, people who work in TV, they don't know that it's bad. And it's taken me leaving TV to realize how awful it really is. But the show must go on at all times, and we're climbing, and we're trying to get our name out there, or we're trying to get something happening. And so you and I, if we sat down and had a few drinks, we would have probably more horrific stories than anything the MAFS cast has ever gone through. But we're still here, true believers.
What I like about Alex is that she doesn't seem to have an agenda against Channel 9 or Endemol Shine Australia, the production company. She will defend the show when she feels it needs defending, but she'll also reveal the truth about the techniques used. And one of the things I've been fascinated with is the morals of the production team. And we ended up having an interesting chat about that element. I want to ask you a serious question. Do you think people who work on reality TV shows are moral people?
I think that if you were to do it long term, there would be a little bit of I can't speak for everybody because the people that I know that worked on it, it was a means to an end. And Endemol Shine has great taste in taking the most talented people in Australia, much like advertising, and wringing us dry, taking us for all we're worth, and then promising us the world. But at the end of the day, you are really just creating reality TV. So in terms of I cannot, and I don't think any human should purport to be able to make a claim over the morality of hundreds and hundreds of people. This show has been going for a decade and it's had thousands of people come through those doors. I cannot purport to decide whether they're moral or not. But I will admit that it is an ethical conundrum. It's as all media is. Every single thing you do in media, you're always deciding ratings versus the human. That is the fundamental crux that we deal with as journalists, as producers, as writers, as anybody. We're always dealing with, if it bleeds, it leads. That's what we're taught, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're always dealing with that conundrum. And I can see how after years of working in TV and you're trying to pay your bills, MAFS pays pretty well. It's pretty popular. If you can do MAFS, you can do anything. It's really just normal humans who got into the business because they had a passion, they had a dream, and they're skilled and talented. And they're just trying to make ends meet. They're trying to just get to the end of it. So in terms of thinking that these producers are these awful satanic people, maybe the people at the top do have questionable morality, to be honest, because I probably couldn't sleep at night thinking this was my main achievement in life. To me, it was it wasn't a stepping stone, but it was an era, because I wanted to know, because I was a fan. And I think there's a lot of producers like me who are just, it's an era, it's offered to you. You want to know, it's like a car crash, right? You're you shouldn't look, but you want to. And if somebody offers you a job on Married at First Sight and they pay you well and you're going to learn all these,
the pinnacle, yeah.
You're going to do it. And then it's how long do you stay though? So I lasted 2 seasons and then I was probably enough for me.
I found it to be a fascinating interview, and there's plenty more insights as well. You can watch the whole thing by going to youtube.com/@Mcnight tonight. That's youtube.com/@Mcnight tonight. A few weeks ago, we talked about CBS gaining the first interview with Bondi hero Ahmed Al-Ahmed. While clips of the interview were shown on various CBS news programs, there wasn't one big definitive story. Channel 9 is set to change all that, with word the network has secured the first Australian TV interview for $25,000. That report from Sky News Australia suggests there was a bidding war between 9 and 7, with 9 claiming victory for a 60 minutes interview. How times have changed. Not so long ago, an interview of this calibre would be much higher. In fact, the 7 News Spotlight interview with Kathleen Folbig cost a reported $400,000. So $25,000 is a good deal. Or is it? Once upon a time, A Current Affair and Today Tonight would throw that kind of money out for an exclusive interview for their nightly current affairs shows. Now that's the price 60 Minutes is paying, and I'm sure they did so with some trepidation. You see, not only is Ahmed Al-Ahmed already spoken to American networks, in my opinion, he's not great talent despite his hero status.
Were you worried about the second gunman on the footbridge?
No, I didn't worry about anything. I was just, my target was just to take the gun from him and to stop him from killing a human being life. And not killing innocent people.
Now, don't get me wrong, there's high prestige in getting this interview, but so far I haven't really seen any emotion from him in interviews. Maybe 60 Minutes can draw that out of him. It's been reported Dimity Clancy is the reporter, so maybe she can do it. One thing's for sure, though, the fact that Seven wasn't willing to go higher tells you everything about the state of finances in television. The big money just isn't there anymore. Let's talk about video podcasting. When Netflix announced a wide-ranging deal with The Ringer to bring video podcasts to its platform, it sent a clear message to the industry. Audio alone is no longer enough. While content has always been king, video podcasting is now central to how audiences discover, watch, and engage with shows. Announcing the deal, Netflix VP of Content Licensing and Programming Strategy, Lauren Smith, had this to say: "As video podcasts continue to grow in popularity, our partnership with Spotify allows us to bring full video versions of these top shows to both Netflix and Spotify audiences. From pop culture and lifestyle to true crime and sports, this curated selection of video podcasts adds fresh voices and new perspectives to Netflix, making our entertainment lineup more exciting than ever." And she's right. And the data backs it up. Last year, YouTube revealed it had now reached more than 1 billion monthly users consuming podcast content. Yep, 1 billion. YouTube also reported that 400 million hours of podcast content are watched on TV screens every month. That tells us everything we need to know. If you want to grow your podcast in 2026 and beyond, video podcasting is no longer optional. And this isn't just about cutting short clips for social media. Audiences are now choosing video podcasts as a primary way to consume long-form content on YouTube, on smart TVs, and increasingly across major streaming platforms. In response to these changes, I've launched a new service designed to help podcasters transition to video without the traditional cost, complexity, or technical headaches. Using the technology and production techniques I've developed across Mcnite Tonight, Booty and the Beasts, Monsters Who Murder, and other videocasts, I'm making professional video podcasting services available from anywhere in the world. The business is called videopodcast.online. It's a one-stop shop for turning audio podcasts into polished broadcast quality vodcasts. Now, we produce professional video podcasts remotely, ready for platforms like YouTube. No studios, no complicated setups, no awkward Zoom podcast look. You and your co-host can be anywhere in the world with manual switching that allows for wide shots, close-ups of the person speaking, and natural reaction shots, just like real television. There are flexible packages available depending on your budget and how far you want to go for your show visually. I'm genuinely excited about this project because it allows me to bring more than 30 years of television and radio experience to creators trying to stand out in a crowded podcast market. And if you think audiences still prefer rough, raw production over a polished look, that assumption no longer holds. Expectations have changed. In my own work, the more professional the presentation, the stronger the engagement, consistently. We're all competing for attention, and video is now the difference between blending in and standing out. If you're ready to take your podcast to the next level, professional video podcasting no longer has to be difficult. Take a look at videopodcast.online and let me know what you think. It's the headline that sparked outrage around the nation. An opinion piece by Aaron Patrick titled "Why I Wouldn't Marry Susan Lee." It led to posts like this from former Senator Holly Hughes, who said, "This headline is everything that's wrong with politics and the press gallery in this country." News.com.au reported on the outrage the article sparked among female MPs. It even led to this extraordinary moment in federal parliament during question time last week.
Equality for women is also about the standards and example we set, the culture we are part of, and the language that we use. And last week, The Nightly published a piece by Aaron Patrick under the headline, "Why I Wouldn't Marry Susan Lee." That headline is a disgrace, and the article is no better. I don't intend to quote from it any further. You really only need to know one thing about it. That article would never have been written about a male political leader. One of the lessons I would hope that this parliament and those who observe it have learnt from Julia Gillard's time as Prime Minister is that it is not enough to shake our heads at this stuff in private. As leaders, we have a responsibility to call it out, and today, as Prime Minister, I call it out.
Yeah, it's pretty bad form and a lapse of judgment, not only from the journalist, but the editors who went with that headline. And in a move that should surprise no one, the Nightly has changed the headline to the less controversial Susan Lee has some explaining to do. But the story remains the same. At least they haven't tried to hide the evidence. If they had deleted the article completely, that would have led to more stories and more backlash. Now, I talked about this story on Monday's edition of McKnight Tonight, but I think it's worth revisiting because it comes to the very heart of journalistic ethics. The Media Diaries section in The Australian dropped a big story this week about a blow-up between a Channel 7 reporter and her cameraman while in rural New South Wales covering the manhunt for Julian Ingram. According to the report by Steve Jackson, it's the explosive foul-mouthed spray that has been echoing through newsrooms around the country. A 7 News reporter, Inga Nielsen, literally loses her bottle and throws it on the ground while calling her cameraman an arsehole and the C word before storming out of a crime scene presser and telling him to F off. The cameraman in question was Finn Hawkins. Here's the video of the moment as posted by The Australian, although I warn you, it's a little hard to hear.
No, you can just sit in the airport, it's alright. You can sit in the airport, it's alright.
Can you stop being an asshole, Finn? Otherwise I'm literally gonna
Now, according to the paper, the falling out between the pair stems from the fact Hawkins, the camo, told Nielsen, the reporter, he had been told one of their rivals was being pulled off the story to be replaced by a more experienced reporter. The Channel 7 reporter then apparently confirmed the news with her rivals, but also told them who Hawkins had received his intel from. In other words, she disclosed his source, something no journalist should ever do. As you can imagine, the cameraman wasn't happy and made his displeasure known, reportedly accusing her of dogging him. She then complained to her bosses at 7 that he called her a dog. The thing that gets me about this is the reporter doesn't realise she's done something wrong. What right does she have to reveal someone else's source? Now, I know this isn't some big investigation in a story, but it is still intel the cameraman got from someone. And by telling her rivals who it was, not only has she put that person in trouble, but she's betrayed the cameraman that she works with. That's just not right. In no way is it okay for a reporter to ever reveal a source. Never, ever. Can Inga Nielsen be trusted with sources based on this? That she didn't think it was a big deal to reveal who gave Finn this information? I don't understand how she then thinks it's worth reporting him and then using all those words against him. There's a big difference between being called a dog and dogging as well. I think Finn Hawkins has every right to be upset. He gave her information. She abused that and threw him under the bus. Inga Nielsen really has some explaining to do. Now, if this reporting is wrong, get in contact with me. I'll correct the record. But judging by what is in this report, and it's pretty comprehensive, I think there's some big questions about ethics going on here. While Australian television celebrates its 70th anniversary this year, the medium actually turned 100 years old a couple of weeks ago. Back in 1926, John Logie Baird demonstrated the first mechanical television, or televisor as he called it, in London. It was very different to what we now know to be television. He used a Nipkow disc to transmit moving silhouettes and later human faces. And of course, the TV Week Logie Awards are named after him. Over the weekend, a symposium was held in Melbourne discussing the future of TV. Dr. Damien O'Meara from RMIT was a panel moderator, and I spoke to him on McKnight Tonight on Monday. One of the discussion points we had related to what the future of TV schedules might look like. Will we get to a point where free-to-air TV is essentially just a 24-hour news channel and sport channels?
Certainly, they are the formats right now that play best, and reality TV, which still captures that appointment sense, but it doesn't mean people aren't watching it on catch up. But there was we had our final panel was kind of looking at the future, and every single person said, look, I'm not going to say I've got a crystal ball. And I think that's probably a good way to approach this. We do have a trend that we are getting broadcasters becoming a space for live sport, live news, reality TV, and for the foreseeable future, that's where I think we're going. Whether or not we kind of find something that shifts that trend, like that remains to be seen. And certainly, I put it to the broadcasters to think about, well, what can you be doing to kind of give drama a place? Because currently the ABC is the home of Australian drama. Yes, we still have a few great shows, and I will call out RFDS as one of the ones that I've particularly loved watching on the commercials. But if you want to see Australian drama now, you almost have to go to the ABC, and then the streamers are a distant second.
Yeah, well, we're seeing, companies like Stan do a lot of Australian drama as a point of difference. But the fact is, the revenue, the budgets for television, they're being squeezed because advertising is going to all these other different places. You mentioned streamers. So the big question now as we look to the future of TV is Australia big enough for 3 commercial stations? Do you think Channel 10 seems to be the third one in the commercial environment that's struggling? Where do you think Channel 10, do you think it will survive in the next 5 to 10 years?
I often have this conversation with friends about Channel 10 in particular, because at the moment that you hear the rumors and you see the commentary that they are struggling and maybe that it's time to go down to 2. I'd be a bit sad in many ways, because Channel 10 has
So would I.
at points in its history been really great at hitting demographics that get missed by others. And that worries me, because even if we sort of view this as a market of diminishing returns, I worry for the prominence of our content and the prominence of our stories and the cultural role that TV plays for us being lost as we kind of start to move away from the broadcast. Because even with I know the streamers are calling them quotas, I call it a reinvestment requirement. I'll call it a quota with some quotas on it. But even with the reinvestment requirement, we don't know how prominent or present our content's going to be. And we don't know how much they're going to make. They're not getting a requirement to make a certain number of hours, a certain proportion of their content, a certain level of prominence in the app. None of that is clear yet. And until it is, it's just a reinvestment requirement that, if they could spend, I don't know, $100 million on 6 hours of drama and say, well, tick, we're done. And I don't know if that's going to be any different to what we see until someone tells me exactly how it's going to look.
And while we were talking about the future of television, Damien dropped this tidbit about what Freeview Australia is planning for smart TVs. Can traditional TV exist in the streaming landscape? Can it survive?
Well, one of the panelists we had was Dean Dedges from Freeview Australia, and he's certainly pushing that message. And he's
he has an agenda, Fair enough to him. I'm not arguing with it.
But he did talk about they're currently in the process of looking at a solution that is built into the smart TV to have a broadcast that you don't need an app for. And for him, he said that this is probably the key thing to the future, is that it needs to be something built into the television. You don't need an aerial to get access to it. You can do it with an internet connection, and it's not an app you download. It becomes just like hitting that that button, the guide button to get your TV. So that's what they're looking at. And I think that gives us some potential, because I think a big part of the challenge is, and I have to say I am one of these people, because the aerial in my home is not near my TV, that I have to rely on the internet to use my TV now. So I have to watch the live stream channel on the app if I want to watch live TV.
I think that's a game changer. And I haven't heard that Freeview is trying to do that. But the idea that on your smart TV, you can essentially have live TV without the need for an aerial, that's fabulous. I mean, that could save Australian television and be used all around the world. I hope they do it. I had never thought of such a thing, but it's got me excited. The idea that I can just go and channel surf on an app in the smart TV, like I might choose HBO, I might choose Netflix, but I can just choose free-to-air TV without the need for an aerial. Geez, that's a cracker. Let's hope that happens soon. Last week, I lamented the blind spot radio industry podcast Game Changers has towards AM radio. Despite the fact AM talkback stations like 2GB and 3AW usually top the ratings by a lot, the podcast almost refuses to acknowledge its existence. So you can imagine how pleased I was to see former Game Changer podcaster Wade Kingsley talking about the power of AM radio on his new podcast, The Quarter Hour. And he did it with none other than former Brisbane radio king, Spencer Howson.
It doesn't usually get the sexy headlines. I mean, I always think about, the headlines about which station's number one, and they always talk about Kyle and Jackie O being number one in Sydney. But 2GB in Sydney does well, 5AA Adelaide does well, and that those stations have a really strong connection to community and a strong connection to localism, whether it be talk or music. And I sometimes think that we kind of overlook those because it's not as sexy to talk about AM. But from an advertising perspective, from a listener perspective, these AM formats, whether they're talk or music, generate a lot longer time spent listening, right?
That's true. I mean, part of that's because they tend to attract an older audience, and older audiences can listen longer as well. People are still listening to radio, and I don't need to tell your audience that, but our mutual friend James Cridlin likes to remind people that radio listening isn't declining in terms of the CUM, the number of people who are listening. It's just that people are not listening for as long because of the competition from audio books and streaming music, et cetera, et cetera. So all radio stations could learn from what you just mentioned, and that is building time spent listening. And if we could do that, then that's going to be a very good thing for every radio station in Australia.
It was a great chat. And you can find the Quarter Hour podcast on all the usual platforms. But Wade, I'm really glad to see you doing a video version, live no less. But I'm going to be honest, it looks pretty basic. You might have to try out Video Podcaster online to make it look more professional. Just give me a call. And finally, it's time for this week's edition of Shit I Just Don't Care About. And this week, it's on-air talent who expect a job to be theirs when the incumbent leaves. The Herald Sun recently ran a sob story about Madeline Sparks' shock snub for Channel 9's top weather role after the departure of the iconic Lavinia Nixon. According to the report, Spark had been reassured that she didn't need to audition for what she thought was a firm succession plan. But that didn't turn out to be the plan. Instead, the role went to Perth-based weather presenter Sherry Lee Biggs, shocking many in the 9 News Melbourne newsroom, apparently. And they went on about how the job was supposed to be hers. But you know what? This is television, and nothing is yours until you get it. Promises are promises, but facts are facts. Look, to be honest, Sherry Lee Biggs is a star. When she was on the Today Show, she shone, and she's done a great job in Perth. Now, she might be someone from Perth coming to Melbourne, and Melbourne is very parochial, so the network bosses are definitely taking a gamble on that fact. But she is a star, and I think she'll do very well. And I'm sorry, we've all missed out on jobs that we like. But honestly, I just don't give a shit. It's just one of those things. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. All right. That brings us to the end of this edition of Media McKnight. Video episodes go live at 9 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time every Tuesday, but they are available earlier for paid subscribers. The article is available every Wednesday morning at tvblackbox.com.au. I'm Rob McKnight. I hope to see you again soon.